So I told you that one of the most important parts of transformational conversation is to start with facts, good facts. And we have a great speaker for you today who's going to give you an overview of some of the information you need to know to have a really good conversation. Her name is Kathy Knecht, and she has been involved not only in leadership groups in Maricopa County and in heading them up, so the leader of leaders. She's been involved in business groups and chambers of commerce, also in leadership positions. And on the education side, she's held state and holds national positions working on education issues to further support growing those trees of knowledge. So without further ado, let me turn you over to Kathy Knecht.
Thank you. Well, I don't have to be mic'd or anything, right? This is really cool. It's so exciting to be here with you today.
You'll have to be close to that.
I have to be back here. Okay, I'll be back here. So exciting to be here with you today out here in Mesa. I live in the Northwest Valley, and I understand that we'll be talking to other young people from across the state. So this is a tremendous opportunity for me, and I'm really grateful to be able to be here. I could talk about education all day, every day. I used to be a classroom teacher in Glendale, Arizona, and also in Illinois. And once you are a teacher, you never get the passion for education out from under your skin. So I feel really excited to share with you today some big ideas about education funding. If you've heard people talk about it, you know that it is very, very complex, education funding. And unfortunately, it's also quite political. And it didn't used to be that way. I think the older people in the room would agree that it used to be just naturally understood that we're all citizens and we all care about our kids together and we want the best opportunities for them. And so we're going to provide great schools for all of them. And things just kind of went and flowed much simpler back in the good old days. So that's part of my conversation. How does this work? Like that? Okay. So Tara asked me to start with framing the conversation with why should you care about funding education, right? What does it matter to you? Well, W.E.B. Dubois, I used to say Dubois, I looked it up, it's Dubois, who was an American sociologist, said way back in the 1800s, late 1800s, either the United States will destroy ignorance, in other words, we will have educated people, or ignorance will destroy the United States. And I think that very well frames the conversation. So I said that it used to be easier in the good old days. Don't you love it when older people say that to you and they want to talk about the good old days? Well, let me tell you how it used to be simpler. It used to be that there were really three kinds of education. Most of Americans went to their neighborhood school district school, right? And then there were some people that went to private and religious schools. And there were some people that, even back in the day, would homeschool their kids. But public funds only went to the public schools. Things are different now. Right now in Arizona, we have 4 different modes of educating children. There are still public district schools, school districts. By the way, how many of you went to a school district? Went to a school that's part of a school district? Okay. There are still private and religious schools. Anybody do that? Okay. Now there are charter schools. Anybody go to a charter school? Okay. And some people are still homeschooled. All 4 of those forms of educating students now receive public funds. So what happens when there aren't a lot of funds and a lot of different groups trying to get funds? Anybody want to comment on that? What happens?
A lot of people are trying to fight over a tiny bit and no one ends up getting very much.
Exactly, and this session is now over. No, it is not. But that's exactly right. You have an instead of what used to be that we're all doing the same thing and we're all fighting, going in the same direction, all of a sudden in times of scarcity, when there's really not enough to go around, you get different groups fighting over limited resources. Very insightful of you, young lady. So I do come from the school district world, so a lot of what I'm going to say has to do with that. But remember, public education in general comes from what we as taxpayers pay. All right, so some of this has to do with what I'm saying. I'll direct my attention to this when it does. But as you saw on the paper that the Arizona Town Hall provided for you, education funding in Arizona has not increased since before 2008. Can you tell me what happened around 2008, 2009 that may have something to do with that? The Great Recession, exactly. Kudos to you. We have a bright group of young people here today. That's exactly right. We had a horrible hit to our economy in terms of the Great Recession. That problem was exacerbated because before that, when Arizona was riding high and fat and happy, and there seems to be growth going on forever, and taxes were rolling in, some of our legislators at the time decided, you know what, we've got so much money coming in, we're going to lower taxes, which was great at the time. But then when the economy fell, the amount of taxes that were coming in became smaller and smaller. So a lot of times, people will say to you, we already spend so much in education in Arizona, it's the biggest piece of the pie. Is that true? Yes, it is. What's the problem? The pie has been shrinking and shrinking and shrinking since 2008. So I use this analogy. Let's say you were a mom or a dad and you had hungry children. And you could say, well, I'm going to give you a whole half of the pie. Well, if the pie's only this big, it's not going to satisfy your hunger, right? Okay. So, a U.S. Census Bureau report released in 2015 said that in Arizona, all public schools spent about $7,200 per student. This was in 2013, 4 years ago, but I'll tell you, it's really not too different. And this is what's important. We can argue about whether we're 48th or 49th or 50th when we compare ourselves to other states, but we are way, way, way below the national average. So as a state, compared to the 49 others, our state pays less per student. And in fact, the national average was $10,700 in 2013. Okay, so. All right, so what do Arizonans think about that? Oh, wrong slide. I'm going to skip ahead. There was a poll done at the end of last year by voters in 2016, and they asked men, women, Republicans, Democrats, everybody, and they said, and 74% of Arizonans said, we think that we need to put more money into schools. 74%. Now, in a different poll with 500 registered voters in Arizona, 61% of the people said not only do they think that we need to fund education more in Arizona, but they would be willing to pay higher taxes to do that. So. All right, so what are the results of some underfunding? There's two main things going on in Arizona right now that are a problem because we haven't been putting more money in over the years. The first one is the teacher shortage. How many of you heard about the teacher shortage in Arizona? Okay, there are a lot of problems. One is that this one here about retiring, 23% of teachers may be ready to retire in the very near future. And there aren't a lot of people, I shouldn't say there aren't a lot. I should say there are fewer young people going into college and university with the goal of becoming a teacher than there used to be before. Can you think of why that might be? Why it might be that not as many people are going into the field of education? Why? That's right. That's right. Some reports recently said Arizona is the worst place to be a teacher in the country. And so that's not very encouraging when you're setting out to make a life's plan, right? Well, it's so bad that in Arizona, and this is a couple months old, there are 4,300 positions, teaching positions, meaning kids in classrooms who don't have a professional certified teacher teaching that class. So while we can say it's not fair for the teacher that they're not being paid what is equitable pay from state to state, I would argue it's not fair to the students who don't have a highly qualified teacher in front of them. So that's one big issue that's facing Arizona schools right now. And the other one, and you're probably going to hear more about this in the next couple of years, is capital funding. Capital funding is the part of the budget, the school budget, that goes towards buildings. So did anybody hear at the beginning of this school year that the Glendale Elementary School District had to close down 2 schools because literally they were crumbling? And so they had 2 whole elementary schools closed for 5 weeks. Is that kind of a pain in the neck for those families? Yeah, really is. And it was a safety concern. And this kind of thing, our schools are, I mean, Arizona is getting older, and the schools have been built, a lot of them, in the 70s and the 80s, and they're getting older. So that is another big issue. And I see Tara's looking at her watch, so we're going to move it along. So why do we care? And that's a school district, but this is all schools, right? So why should you care? There's 3 reasons that I think we should all care about education, regardless of what form it's in. When we think about education. Thank you, Brian. Kids, community, and democracy. First of all, at least in district schools, there are 1.1 million children in Arizona depending on their local school districts. So you add in the charter school kids, and we're looking at about 1.5 million kids that are counting on good schools to launch them on their future. Okay? Another reason is we want kids not only to get a great education, but to go on and get a great job, right? Do I think that college is the only pathway to a successful future? No. But statistics do say that among millennials, the annual earnings for somebody who only got a high school diploma is $17,500 less than somebody who has a college degree. Okay, so this is a long list, but here we go. When we have quality schools, regardless of the modality, our cities have great employment, it's a good paying job, our property values go up because people want to buy a house next to a great school, lower crime rates, cohesive neighborhoods, skilled workforce, higher wages. For when you get old and you are collecting Social Security, you want people with high-paying jobs paying more into Social Security, so there's more for us when for you when you get older. Stronger tax base, people are healthier when they have a good education, teen pregnancy rates are lower in communities with good schools, your houses are more attractive to people who want to buy them, and businesses want to come there as well. And finally, democracy. Democracy. Public schools were built to build citizens. And Thomas Jefferson said, if we educate and inform the whole mass of the people, that's the only sure way to rely on the preservation of our liberty. So I really believe that. I could stay and talk about this forever. She won't let me. Thank you for the opportunity. I will leave my contact information. I'm happy to talk about this subject with anybody, anytime. Thank you very much.